Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I can confirm it is 4:30 and the meeting is now live streaming. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Good afternoon, Council, members of SLT, and members of the viewing public. I see we indeed have quorum, so I call into session this Committee of the Whole meeting on Monday, February 6th at 4:30 p.m. As usual at this time, we will have the land recognition statement, and tonight it will be read by Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. I will turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kerr that the agenda for the February 6, 2023 special meeting of committee be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this item from council? Not seen any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Eckert.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof.
Thank you. Does any member of council have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare after viewing the agenda? And Madam Clerk, I see none.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've so noted. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to item 4.1 on the agenda. This is department reports, and we have corporate services. We have a presentation of the 2023 water and wastewater budget being presented by the treasurer and the deputy treasurer. To Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. To the members of the Treasury Department, are you ready for the presentation?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are. I just wanted to start by just a little bit of a background with the water wastewater budget. We're very excited to be here tonight to present the last of our budgets. We did the capital budget, the operating budget, and this is the water and wastewater budget. Just a little bit of a background. The water is provided to the town of Pelham on a two-tiered system. The Niagara region is responsible for the treatment and the supply of the water, while the town is responsible for the distribution, billing, and collection. The water is wholesale to the town, which then subsequently distributes it to the users. The town has two main service areas, being Fenwick and Fawn Hill, and the town also owns a water hauling station. The wastewater collection is also provided on a similar two-tiered system. The town provides collection and transmission of wastewater, while the region provides the treatment. And similar to water, there are two main service areas, Fenwick and Fawn Hill. Not all water users in these areas have municipal wastewater services. I'm going to share my screen, and the Deputy Treasurer, Usama Siraj, is actually going to be presenting the water and wastewater budget tonight. If we can have the questions until saved till the end, then that would make it a little bit easier for us. It's not a really big presentation, so we'll start from there. The agenda that we have we're going to talk about the 2023 water wastewater budget overview, the historical averages for consumption and billing, the 2023 rate increases, the water wastewater reserves analysis, the 2023 water and wastewater rates, the impact to the household, and how Pelham compares to the other municipalities as far as the rates are concerned. So now I'm going to hand it off to Usama.
Thank you, Teresa. Good evening, members of council, Mr. Mayor. Through the mayor, I will continue on the presentation. I'm assuming everybody can hear me okay. So looking at the water wastewater budget overview, water wastewater rates are charged to users based on a fixed cost and variable or consumption usage. We had a BMA management consulting firm come in and do a long-range financial plan for water and wastewater back in 2018, which continues to provide us with guidance for sustainability and rate setting when we're looking at the budgets for water wastewater. So although the cost to the town, the town's cost to provide water and wastewater service is largely fixed, about 80%, the residents are billed a larger proportion on a variable basis. So what this does is it promotes water conservation and ensures that the overall water bill can be lowered if less water is consumed. The remaining 32% of water and 46% of wastewater bill continues to be on a fixed basis. So if we can go to the next slide. So here are some of the items that have an impact on a rate setting strategy. Continued water conservation and rainfall throughout the year are two of the external factors that will have some impact on how we set our rates. Regionals approved rates will have a big impact. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. Capital requirements and reserve balance, again, another big factor impacting how we set our rates. And lastly, the operating costs to maintain our water distribution and billing system. So contractor services, salaries, those costs will also have an impact. So we're going to start off by looking at some historical averages. So this is for the purchase of water and wastewater treatment that the town will be purchasing from the region. As Teresa mentioned, we're a lower tier, two-tier system. So as being the lower tier, we purchase our water and the wastewater treatment from the region of Niagara. So at the top, you've got the per cubic meter rate of water and wastewater treatment. Looking down at the table, you've got the total cost, and then all the way at the bottom, you've got the cubic meters of water purchase and the wastewater treated. So as you can see, the big picture to take from here, over the last 4 years, the cost of both water and water treatment has been going up for the town. We start off by looking at the average or estimate of what we will consume and what we will need to purchase from the region, and any discrepancy there is shown as a variance in the last two columns. Looking at the next slide. So continuing on to look at the historical average, these are the billings. So up here, up at the top, you've got the rates that the town will charge its residents when billing for water and wastewater. Continuing down the table, you've got the total budgeted revenue for water and then the wastewater. And then at the very bottom, we've got the cubic meters of water and wastewater billed. So it follows a similar pattern to the purchases. We continue to bill based on the water that's purchased and consumed. And as you can see, the actual volume billed will vary slightly from year to year, depending on external factors that were highlighted in a few previous slides. So that's what you have at the bottom. So this chart right here charts out the two different purchases versus bills. So the orange line there shows the water that the town purchases from the region, and the blue line there shows the water that the town will bill. So for example, if you look at the year 2021, we purchased 1.4 million cubic meters of water from the region. We billed out 1.253 million cubic meters of water to our residents. And the difference between the two amounts, or the 2 points on the graph, is a 10.5%, which is essentially known as unbilled water or water loss. If you look at the last few years, the town is averaging just in and around 15% in terms of water loss, which is fairly common amongst municipalities because not all the water that we purchase from the upper tier would be billed out. Some is lost through the distribution system. There's other things such as, fire hydrant usage. There's other water that's not really billed. So given that we're at 15%, it's on the better end of the average that I've seen at some other municipalities. The next chart is similar to water, but it's for wastewater treated. So again, the orange line is the treatment of wastewater purchase. The blue line is the billing of the wastewater. So as example, in 2022, we purchased 1.46 million cubic meters of wastewater and billed out just under 1.1 million, which gives you a loss of or unbilled wastewater of about 25%. Again, seems a little bit higher for 2022, but when you're looking at a 3-year average, we're within reason in comparison to some of the other municipalities. And as I mentioned previously, external factors. So if you have a rainy season, that will have an impact on that gap and on that water loss. So if you have more rainfall, that rainwater and snow melt will inevitably go through the drainage and into your sewer systems, which will get treated at the treatment plants, or cost to treat that water will be higher. However, since this was rainwater and didn't come from the actual taps, it's not water that's billed. So those are some of the factors that will impact how we bill and set the rates. So looking at the 2023 region rate increases, as I mentioned, purchase and treatment of water and wastewater are the largest components of each respective budget here at the town. So in other words, 35% of our water budget or 65% of our wastewater budgets are tied to a single line item, which is the cost for the town to purchase the water or to purchase the treatment of water from the region. The region bills the town for water on a combination of fixed and variable charge, and wastewater on a fixed charge, which then they base on the estimated treatment volume. So at the beginning of the year, they will estimate, say the town of Pelham will consume 1.5 million cubic meters of water or wastewater. So they will set the billing amount based on that. And then any change at the end of the year in actual consumption will get billed back to us in terms of that reconciliation adjustment. And then for the water, it's a little bit more straightforward. We essentially 75% of the water from the region is billed on a variable basis. So we essentially pay for what we use. So the regional rate increases will put significant pressure on the town as we set a rate. So as you can see from the above, 35 and 65% for budgets are tied to these costs of purchase and treatment that are outside of our control. So they have a huge impact on how we set our rates. So the 2023 approved rates from the region are now available and approved by their council. So I've included them here for you. For water, we're looking at about 7.25% increase over last year's cost. And for wastewater, it's about 16.33% before any reconciliation adjustment. Just one more point I want to mention on the last slide. If you are looking at the council reports from the region, you may notice a different headline rate increase for water and wastewater. I think the headline rate for water is 5.2% and wastewater is 10.5%. Those rates that they report on are an average of the 12 municipalities that the region deals with. Now, we obviously only care about the town of Pelham because that's ultimately what we have to pay. So what I've included here in our analysis and obviously in all of our assumptions are the actual rate increases that the town of Pelham will be paying the region for 2023. So this chart right here summarizes the change from year to year in the line item, which is the cost to purchase water for the town. So if you look at the first column, you've got the fixed rate, and then the second column, you've got the variable, if you're looking at the first column, you've got the fixed rate, which is 25% of our water bill from the region. And that fixed portion is going up by about 13.56%. And then if you look at the variable rate, it appears that it's going down. However, if you follow the note 1, it says that there's actually a 5.14% increase in rate for the variable component of water that the town will have to pay the region. The only reason this chart shows as a net reduction is because we look at a 3-year average when we do our budget to see how much water we think we will need to purchase from the region. So for 2023, the amount is about 100,000 cubic meters less. So last year we budgeted that we will need to purchase 1.6 million cubic meters of water from the region. This year for 2023, we're estimating to only purchase 1.5 million cubic meters of water. So if we had budgeted the same amount, you would see that second variable rate line also go up by 5.14%. So bottom line, the total cost to town for water purchase was 1.319 million in 2022. And in 2023, it's 1.346 million. So even though we're purchasing less water or anticipating purchasing less water, the bottom line budget for that line item is still going up by 2%. Looking at wastewater, again, they bill us on a fixed 100% fixed component, and then the second line would be anything reconciliation adjustment that they will do. So you look at the fixed component, we budgeted 1.566 million for 2022. We're budgeting 1.822 million for 2023, which is an increase of 16.33% year over year. And then when you add in the reconciliation adjustment, so essentially what the town is using more water treatment than the region estimates, you're looking at a bottom line cost increase of about 25% or just under 400,000 for that one item. And as I mentioned, I'm going to repeat myself, that one item accounts for 65% of our overall wastewater budget at the town. So the other component that I mentioned will have an impact is the capital plan and the reserve fund. So over the next 10 years, substantial capital infrastructure needs for water and wastewater will continue to put pressure on our reserves and therefore our rates. The town contributions to reserves have largely been aligned with the BMA study recommendation between 2019 to 2022. Yet the reserves are still underfunded over the next 10 years due to our significant capital rehabilitation infrastructure needs. So down here at this table, at a very high level, you're looking at the first two lines show you the BMA study's recommendation for reserve fund contributions for water and wastewater reserve funds. So the study recommended over the period between 2019 to 2023, we contribute 2.8 million to water and 2.02 million to wastewater. Moving down below, we have the actual reserve contributions, keeping in mind 2023 is still proposed. So if we look at the same period, it shows that we've contributed 2.71 million to water and just under 2.8 million to wastewater. So if you take a second here, you would say, okay, well, this seems not too bad because for water, we're pretty much, we're just short about 147,000. And it looks like we're doing great for wastewater because we've over contributed 771,000 over the same period in comparison to what the BMA study recommendation was. But the reason for that discrepancy is because the BMA study recommendations were based on a capital plan that was true in 2018, and there have been a lot of changes to that capital plan since then. So some of these capital projects have shifted in future years. Some of these capital projects have now gone up significantly in cost due to COVID and due to supply chain constraints and other reasons. So it doesn't necessarily present an accurate picture when you just look at these amounts. So we'll go to the next slide where we can see the 10-year reserve fund projection. So looking at the water reserve fund projection, we're projecting the starting balance for 2023 is about 624. Then we add in our projected contribution to the reserve from our operating budget, which is just under 900,000. Then we take away the water capital plan for the year, which is about 930. And that shows us the projected ending balance for that reserve fund for about 592,000. So the water reserve fund looks okay for the next few years based on the current capital plan. However, starting in 2026, you run into a deficit situation. Even though we're increasing our contribution to the reserve about 5% annually, it's still not enough to keep the reserve in a positive balance. And that starting in 2026, it fluctuates between negative and positive. But if you look by the year 2032, starting in the year 2030, really, you're projecting large deficits based on the current capital plan and based on the current contributions that we have. So that's the situation for the water reserve. If we look at the next slide, Wastewater reserve fund, again, looks a lot worse than the water reserve fund. So starting in 2023, our projected starting balance is about 710,000. If you notice from 2 slides ago, it showed that we are over contributed over the last 5 years, which is a good thing, because if we hadn't, it looks like the situation here would be a lot worse. The reserve fund contribution for this year has been cut due to the rate increase from the region. So we're only contributing 343, even though we should be contributing a lot more. And then when we're looking at the actual capital plan, 3.17 million in 2023, that shows us a projected deficit right at the end of 2023 of about 2.1 million, and it only gets worse from there. So again, even though we're increasing our contributions by 75,000 every year going forward, the reserve fund balance projection for the next few years still shows to be in a deficit. So that's why we felt it was important to not deviate too much from the BMA study recommendation for wastewater, at least for the current year. 2023, we will have an update to the long-range financial plan, which will relook at everything and recalculate some of these targets and determine what is the appropriate amount that we need to be setting aside for the next few years so that reserves can go back into a positive balance. So that brings us to the proposed rate increases for 2023. So for 2023, the town is proposing a water rate increase of 6.5%, which is a full percentage lower than the BMA study recommendation, which was 7.5%. So the variable rate increase for water would be about $1. The total rate for water in 2023 would be about $1.89 per cubic meter. And then the table on the right here is the fixed component. So essentially, the first line on that table, the 5/8 inch, that's the meter or the pipe size. That's what most residential customers would pay, which is about $32.64 per billing. And we have 6 billings. So that's essentially the fixed rate for 2 months. And then over the table on the left-hand side is how we determine the rate for variable component. We start off by the total expenses for water, then we subtract off the wastewater, fixed component, then we subtract off any other revenue, which gives us the remaining cost that we need to recover from consumption charges. And then the budgeted billing volume, as I mentioned, we look at the 3-year average to see what we've been billing out. So we're anticipating to bill out 1.242 million cubic meters of water. Dividing the two amount gives us a rate of $1.89 per cubic meters rounded. So the next slide shows the detailed water budget here at the town. I'm going to skip over to the expenditure side. You would notice that the salaries and benefits line shows that there's a decrease in 230,000 in expenditures, but that's not necessarily a decrease. It's a shifting of cost. Staffing costs between water and wastewater budgets. So we re-looked at where staff were really spending their time and tried to allocate the cost based on where they were spending their time. Continuing down below, you would see that the other rate increase is the cost of purchase of water from the region. So you've got the overall water budget here. If there's any more questions, we can take a look at those questions at the end of the presentation. The next, we have the proposed wastewater rate increase. So the town is proposing a rate increase of 9.5%, which is exactly the same as what the BMA's study had recommended. Again, you saw that the reserve fund for wastewater looks a lot worse than the water. So we felt it was important to continue on the same recommended rate increase, at least for the 2023, until we can have that study updated. And in terms of calculating the rates, similar to water, most residents with a 5/8 inch meter pipe size would pay about $41.93 per billing, so every 2 months. And then on the water variable side, they would be paying about $1.41 per cubic meter. And here is the detailed wastewater budget. So you would notice the salary line would have a big increase, but again, it's not any new FTEs or new position. It's just a reallocation of costs between the water and wastewater budget. And then you'd see the big reduction there in the transfer to reserves. And that's because if you look further down, we're projecting about $400,000, just under $400,000 increase from the region for purchase of water. So if we hadn't reduced the contribution to the reserve, we would be looking at double-digit increases for the wastewater. So that brings us to the 2023 average household impact. So this chart here gives you various scenarios depending on what the consumption is, but I'm going to skip to the table at the bottom, which actually breaks down the cost for the most average consumption of 200 cubic meters a year. So anybody consuming 200 cubic meters a year of water a year is looking at an increase of $13.48 per billing. So for every 2 months, breaking that down to about $6.74 per month over 2022, which is 7.93% increase combined, or $80.90 on an annual basis. Looking at the comparison of how we compare to some of our neighboring municipalities, this information comes from the BMA municipal study. So BMA consulting firm does a municipal study that looks at over 100 municipalities and different aspects of cost. So this information is taken straight from that. As the chart shows, this is the 2022 residential water and wastewater costs for the average consumption of 200 cubic meters per year. So if you look at the town of Pelham, we're second from the right. The blue bars represent the 2022 data. So the cost in 2022 at the town was $1,034 for the whole year, which is well below the average of $1,254 among the regional neighboring municipalities. And in fact, the $1,034 is actually the lowest among all the municipalities within the region. And the green bar there just shows you the projected increase with the 2023 rates. Again, even if you compare the 2023 rates to the 2022 average, we're still even below that 2022 average. And as other municipalities have rate increases for 2023, once this information is updated, town of Pelham will still be below that average for 2023. So that brings us to the recommendation that the committee receive the 2023 water and wastewater budget presentation by the treasurer and deputy treasurer for information, and that committee recommend to council to approve the 2023 water wastewater budget, increasing the water rate by 6.5% and the wastewater rate by 9.5% at their meeting scheduled for February 27th, 2023. And that concludes our presentation, and we will be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much to the treasurer and the deputy treasurer for a very thorough report on the water and wastewater budgets. Is there any questions at this time on the report by any members of council? Not seeing any.
Your worship, Councillor Eckhart and Councillor Nisnik both have their hands up.
I'm sorry, I don't have them on my screen. Okay, sorry. Let's go with Councillor Nisnik then.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Great job on that, and made it easy for us to understand. So thank you so much. Just one, I just wondered about going back to pages 8 and 9 about the salaries. There's quite a discrepancy in the amounts there that we saved 200 and something thousand, but then when you added it over to the wastewater side, it was quite a bit different. So now this is the one you handed out to us in hard copies, 230,000 salary benefits saved, and then it's 361,000. So I just don't know if you could explain that difference in the change.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I can explain that. So included in that number would be the grid movements for staff and also the COLA increases. So when we looked, it wasn't a one-to-one shift, the full amount to wastewater. So wastewater received the shift, but then also some of the other increases as well. But I think what we wanted to emphasize is that there are no new staff in there. So it was a matter of looking at everyone at the town and which portion of their salary belongs to water and wastewater. So you have to sort of look at, if you didn't have, if the water and wastewater had to be operated on its own, what would be the services that were required to have that happen? So, for example, a portion of the cashier salary is included there because they're collecting the cash on behalf of that. So we looked at all the different positions, and then that's how it balanced out. So it wasn't just 100% shift from the water. It was also from other departments as well as from the operating budget as well.
Oh, okay, that helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I just have, I guess, well, my questions kind of changed as I went along. Sorry, just a second, lost my paper. So on page 10 of the actual presentation that you gave us, if you could explain, so it said, like originally you said the region was increasing by 7.25%. And then in the notes, though, it says 5.14%, which is the average for the region. So, but our percentage is still 7.25%, correct? That's on page 10.
Oh, sorry.
I can explain that, Teresa, if you can bring it up on the
Yeah,
screen.
I'm going to bring it up. Okay. Can you see it?
We did, and it went away.
All right, let's try it again. Okay, just a second. Maybe if I shared my screen would help. There we go. Is that better?
Yep.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you. Through the mayor, so great question. The difference is the 5.14%. Sorry, if we can go to slide 10.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
You got like a poltergeist here, okay? All right.
Okay, so the 5.14% is the actual rate increase that's applicable to the town. So as I mentioned, the region bills the town on a combination of 25% on a variable basis and 25% on a fixed basis and 75% of the variable basis. So the fixed component is going up by 13.56%, and then the variable component is going up by 5.14%. So if you take the weighted average of the two, that's the 7.25% rate increase. So essentially 25% of your bill, if your bill was $100, $25 is going up by 13.56%, remaining $75 is going up by 5.14%. And then when you look at the overall increase over the $100, you would notice it would be a $7.25. So the bottom line is 7.25. That's just a calculated rate increase that I had done to put it into perspective.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that explanation. That makes sense.
Yeah,
that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eckert.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Through you. So the recommended increase of 6.5% for the water, which is lower than the study that was done of 7.5%. Do we know what the increase would be if we went with the 7.5 increase?
Yeah, it's for you.
Treasurer.
Osama, can you do that quickly?
Yeah, if you could just give me a moment, I'm going to try to calculate that. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, the spreadsheet. It isn't that much more of an increase.
No pressure.
Yeah, I guess while he's calculating that, I'm just wondering why we would, if we're not talking very much dollars, why are we keeping it? Why are we not going with the recommended increase of 7.5? That's all. Keeping in mind the years ahead where we might be getting ourselves into a little bit of trouble with reserves.
Well, I think part of it, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think part of it is that in the last 4 years, 19, 20, 21, 22, we have been averaging 7.5 every year and 9.5 for wastewater, except for last year, wastewater was 7.5. So we were just looking at, with all the different pressures that everyone is having, can the water just be down a little bit just to help offset some of the residents' pressure? I think that's what we were looking at. I don't know, David, if you wanted to add anything else to that.
No, Miss Quinlan Murphy articulately hit that. This is art, not science. And if you feel that it's more important to more appropriately capitalize the reserve, then we'd be happy to move to 7.5. Certainly, you won't get any arguments from the treasurers on putting more into the reserves. It is over the long term, you see it's inadequate, but of course, there is an affordability issue, and that brought it back down under the rate of inflation, which we've reported to you as 6.7. So the 6.5 is under the rate of inflation, 7.5 is not. Council, as you will, we'd be happy to take direction from you.
So I have the amount. If we were to go with 7.5% rate increase, that essentially will add in another $33,000 and change to your reserves. So the impact on an annual basis would be about $86.25, $86.25. On a monthly basis, $7.19 instead of $6.74.
So it's a $6 a year increase. But it gives you $33,000 more to the reserves.
Council?
I think, Usama, did you say if you went with 7.5, would it be a $7 and something increase rather than the $6?
Sorry, it depends on which number we're looking at. So I was talking about the monthly amount. So the monthly amount goes from $6.74 to $7 and change. So over the course of the year, instead of paying $80.90, you're paying $86 and change. So over the course of the year, it's a $6 impact. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments?
Councillor Olson's had his hand up for a while, and I think Councillor Niznik tried to say something, but she's muted. So
Okay, Councillor Olson, then we'll go to.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Through you, it appears to me that this study, I guess we're probably omitting the, just because of the term of it and the range of the study that was undertaken by BMA, but we're missing the cost of East Fenwick. And we're probably not including, due to the principle of conservatism, I'm sure, not including grants. And we're going to be including the increases we see in the cost of materials. So I would suspect that the picture that we see in front of us today is probably a worse picture than what we have here, because I don't think the grants are going to keep up and the costs are going to keep going up. What's driving this, but these reserves right now is the cost of materials, and I understand they've gone up quite a bit. So I think we have to be pretty careful about this, because we're going to be left with the situation where we have to make a decision about whether we take on debt or whether we take on some other means to finance these things. And I'm not sure we have a capacity for more debt. I certainly don't feel like I want to have it, but that's my view of what I see here. I'm looking forward to, I guess the BMA study will be undertaken in the next one will be 2024, I suppose, for the years 2025 to 29.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the BMA study for the water rate study is being done in 2023 for 2024.
Okay,
so this year it'll be done. So for the next budget, we will have the BMA study to reevaluate. Actually, what the study does, two things. One, it looks at the rate, but it also looks at how we are applying the rate, like what percentage we have fixed versus variable. So it actually looks at that too, to say, does it make sense how we're splitting the variable and the fixed portion of our billing?
Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I understand the way that's broken down to encourage conservation. And from the looks of the usage charts, it looks like conservation is working. Our residents are putting in the effort to save water. But I'm afraid that looking at this and the costs that we have ahead of us, I'm wondering now about any deferred projects, how they will show up. Will they show up as current projects, I guess, for the purposes of the study? Because we have some deferrals right on the books right now, I believe.
Who wants to tackle that one?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so all the when they do the BMA study, they will look at all the capital projects that that have to get done. So if they've been deferred, then they're being included in that list that they have to get done.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For some reason or other, I don't have everyone on my screen tonight. Any other questions or comments at this time?
Well, if I could speak up through you,
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
yep.
it's Councillor
Yep.
Nisnik.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So while what my comment kind of when I was on mute, it was basically I moved my lips, but it was like $6 difference is basically 2 cups of coffee for a whole year. So I think when I was reading through it, I was worrying about the saturation point for residents in terms of tax increases, because of course they haven't even seen the region's percentage increase yet. But our capital budget's going up, our operation budget's going up, and then this was the third one that came in that we're all going up. So, but I think it is prudent of us to consider trying to at least be in the average with costs for wastewater and water. And if residents, this is one area where residents can make a difference to their billing if they do conserve water, which that's up to them if they want to conserve water. But I think I would be in support of going to the recommended percentage increase if other councillors also feel that way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments at this time? I'm not seeing any. I know my own feelings are that yes, $6 is not obviously a lot for anyone at this table, and probably not for most people in Pelham. It is a we're in crazy times. The inflation, of course, is the highest it's been in, I believe it's a decade. And I know it's not much. Myself, I appreciate the fact that staff brought forward at 6.5 and realizing that the region is bringing a budget, I believe, around 6.8 or around 7%. And then also we have the transportation charge that hasn't been included yet. For myself, I know it doesn't seem like much, but just I would myself like to see us stay at 6.5, knowing that this overall budget between us and the region is going to be, I'm hoping, higher this year than what we're going to be looking at next year. The last 4 years, we have done 7.5% a year, so that it has gone up quite a bit. I commend council that we have indeed, we were under a lot of pressure last year that some members wanted us to deviate from the plan, but we stayed the course at the plus 7% increase. And my own feeling here is that I would like to stay at the 6.5, knowing that this is going to be a budget that's going to be an increase that's going to be a little bit on the higher than usual side. So that's my opinion. Any other comments, questions from other members of council? And again, I can't see the whole screen, so perhaps just if you have something to say, just shout out your name.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Kerr has his hand up.
Oh, okay, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Nisnik. Part of my rationale is looking at Pelham's position relative to all other 12 municipalities within the region. even with the 6.5, our numbers are still well below anyone else in their 2022 figures. So for the $6, and I understand it's, are we thinking of the death by 1,000 cuts of a nickel here, a nickel there? But in the grand scheme of things, when you listen to people from other areas, the classic line is you measure yourself against neighboring communities and looking at what they're spending versus what you're spending. And if we're above the average, then people get angry, really angry. But if you're well below average, your neighbors get angry with you. It's almost like a no-win situation. Looking at the number of households this would affect and everything else, for $6 a year seems we're doing a lot of talking about $6 a year. So I'm just looking at it from that perspective. New developments coming online, everything else in our town. Personally, I think going at the recommended rate, recognizing, taking a look at the next 5 and 10 years of significant deficits that are going to be faced. $6 invested now is not a bad thing. That's my feelings.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with your analysis of the situation. When we first came in council in 2018, the previous council had not raised rates for 4 years. We were in a very difficult situation, and for the last 4 years, we've aggressively put rate increases in that met the BMA study as recommended by our staff. I'm in a total agreement with the staff recommendations. Yes, $6 isn't very much, but I think going with a staff recommendation is where I would vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. Any other comments or questions?
Your worship, Councillor Wink.
Okay. Councillor Wink, please.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, it's interesting conversation that we're having, because last year, same time we were sitting there in the contrary position of trying to drive these rates down, and now we're looking at driving them up. I agree with the mayor and Councillor Hildebrand saying that we've increased these rates substantially over the last 4 years. There is pressure on everybody, and to Councillor Kerr's point, it's a 1,000 small cuts, and I fully support what staff have recommended, and still people don't care what other people are paying. They're going to look at us and say, okay, I got another 9.5% increase on wastewater and another 6.5% increase on water, and everything's going up. And it's, for a matter of $6 a person, it's not $6 a person. That's the average, and the larger homes and larger families, those larger families are going to be the ones who are impacted, not the families of the people around this council that have 2 people living in the house. Those who have 6 people in the house and showering every day are going to feel the impact. So I will be supporting the staff recommendation.
Thank you. You will be supporting the staff recommendation?
Yes.
No. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any
Mr.
other?
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Councillor Eckert. My reason for bringing this up is what I'm concerned about is 2024, 2025, when we'll be sitting around the table and we have to increase the water rates way more than 7.5% because we've got ourselves into that deficit position. So that's why I brought it up. Generally, I support staff recommendations, but I was just concerned about looking at that reserves down the road. Now we say that $6 isn't much. Well, I guess we can also say that adding 33,000 to the reserves isn't much either, but that was my concern with bringing that 1% increase to your attention.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Eckert. You had every, that was your right to bring it up, and it's led to a wholesome discussion. So, and I understand myself what your point is. You're saying, well, if we don't do it this year, then we're going to have to feel the pain even more so 2 or 3 years down the road. I think, and I can appreciate that. I guess myself and Councillor Hildebrand and Councillor Wink are saying that hopefully the 2 or 3 years down the road, the inflation is back to 2 or 3%, and perhaps we're not looking at our rate and the regional rate being as high. That's I don't mean to put words in their mouths, but I think that's the feeling of the three of us. But I can appreciate what you're saying. Don't for sure. Any other comments, questions, comments, basically, I guess, on the report before us tonight?
Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Councilor Olson, go ahead, sir.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a very aggressive track and that we're on for raising rates. Just imagine, if you will, if we maintain the rate that we're talking about for water, our water rates will double in 11 years. Wastewater, they will double in 8 years. And I think that's pretty aggressive, and I'll be supporting the staff recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. Any other questions or comments? If not, I would turn to the clerk. Do I see any? No. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put on the floor by Councillor Wink. That committee received the 2023 water and wastewater budget presented by the Treasurer and Deputy Treasurer for information. And that committee recommend to Council to approve the 2023 water and wastewater budget, including an increase to the water rate of 6.5% and the wastewater rate of 9.5% at their meeting scheduled for February 21st, 2023. To Mr. Mayor for any further discussion.
Okay, so Council, you've heard the motion. Any other comments, questions to this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrand,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
Councillor Niznik,
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that brings us to the adjournment. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckhart that the special meeting of committee be adjourned. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, any further discussion from Council on adjournment? Not seeing any.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
Councillor Niznik,
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries, and it is 5:23 p.m. and you can gavel out your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Council. This meeting is adjourned, and we will see you in 7 minutes.
Thank you. I just remind members of council that we have another Zoom link, so if you can log off of this one, and we will see